coding, if you will, the way we are written, we call DNA, which can be measured by a machine, and then it can be read by a machine, and it comes out unique. So we do DNA testing for criminal, for investigations and identification. That has to be conclusive. And what's interesting about DNA is that we discovered that it's a few symbols. It's not that many letters like we have in our language, in the alphabet, in the English language. In other languages, it's only a few symbols that form many different combinations. And it's what I see in it is we all have, from that perspective, the same language, as we all have DNA. It can be found in all animated living things. So this DNA is passed on from our parents and determines many genetic properties, but even though it's not completely scientifically proven, many other things from our parents, we're not sure yet how we transfer many other features as well, because in many cases there is striking likeness not only in genetics but also in characteristics. And what's interesting about DNA is that if you look at DNA, it is a coding, like a sentence that we all have. And this sentence is in context with your environment, with your parents. You come from your parents, so you're in context with your parents. You're in context with the whole world, with every living, animate thing you interact with, indirectly or directly. And so you're like a word in a book. From that perspective, you exist in context with everyone else. So already that implies that who I am, my definition of myself, is always a context, in context, and I can only form through others around me and through everything that exists already around me. So actually the definition already is forming from the context around me. So that is pre-programming, in the sense of when I change my definition, my environment already changed to give me that definition where I interpret it from. So it's basically that I adjust to the story in a particular way, and that's my self-definition and the belief and the who I am part of me, so my self-definition. And if you look at a story like my life, if I look at it like a book and my life in context with everyone else, like one big book that's being written, to change the outcome of a story, the story first of a story is based on characters, and characters have a certain way about them, and the story will unfold and will uncover those characters, and a story will play out that fits also the characters and what they stand for, what they believe, what they've defined themselves as, but they've really not defined themselves in books. They are made and defined by someone else, a writer. And a writer interprets reality and writes it down in a book. So from that perspective, it's simply a exertion, a part of reality interpreted and written down, and a particular part is highlighted, so to speak, from characters or something that he or she saw within reality. So the whole DNA story is interesting from the perspective that we already have shown that we human beings are programmed and programmable. And what's interesting about a story, say if everything is a story, we are words in a book that exist in context. To change the entire story, the outcome and the entire story, basically to rewrite it, is to really end that story and either continue. And to initially change any story, any book or any created story, like a pre-programmed set of words that already exists in context, is for every word in that book to be self-realized, so they can self-realize as the creator and what came out of that and what it's interpreted from. And then everything will change from the very first interpretation and separation that took place, and then everything would be self-realized and change at once. But all those different parts will have to do that instantly, or at the moment that everyone has that self-realization, or there is a point where we're not living out a particular definition in context with each other that moves as a pre-programmed whole. It has to stop at an individual level, but eventually the whole story will collapse, if it will, and then we would be able to really start self-realized existence. That is something about pre-program that is very interesting, that we all exist in context, and that everything around us is what we define ourselves. And if something changes around us, we automatically change as we observe the change in the environment. It's like a book, a story that you're part of, and the story that changes is also you that changes. And there is, from that perspective, not some kind of separation that is present in that particular mechanism of definition, because it's a context. I'm a word and I exist in context with everything else of the story and of the words and sentences around me and the sentences that I'm in. So from that perspective, or this is a perspective on DNA that is more ended to what a practical, what it means to, what it implies if you say, okay, we're programmed in a certain way, uniquely, but yet the same, because DNA, we all have it, it's the same format, so it's the same language, so to speak, and we all exist in the same story. And to change that, we really have to basically stop our participation in it from a large extent into creating or giving worth and value to a story of context, of only definition. And that is definitely what I see within myself and around me as well, which is also myself, is that the change and the easiness of accepting, like, okay, this is whatever it is and I'm just tagging along, is really easy to slip into. And it's like just writing out the story and just tagging along, just riding along, and that's it. So yeah, that's a definite change in terms of either saying like, okay, this is something that I've accepted and allowed to exist as, this is the definition that I've accepted and allowed myself, and within that statement, within that realization, you can actually give yourself back to you and stop participating in parts of the story that you've already given yourself to. And I'd say that's my perspective on DNA, and also the relevance of self-forgiveness, and also that it's not necessarily about forgiving something, but rather realizing yourself. Okay, I'd say that covers my perspective on DNA, and what it practically implies.